An issue was raised on GitHub on how to do a simple bank account example in Self, so I threw this screencast together to try and demonstrate it. We start in the standard Self GUI. We have a shell on the top left. I click on the little arrow there and we can see the details of the shell. Hit E to create an evaluator, and I'm going to create an empty object, which is two brackets, and get it, which returns it the hand, and I'll drop it somewhere. This is going to be a bank account object. It currently has no slots. So the first thing we want to do on a bank account, we probably want to have a balance. So I'm going to middle click, choose add slot, and then add a slot called balance, and set it to 0. Next thing we want is a deposit and a withdrawal method. So again, I'll add a slot and with a middle click. This one I'll call deposit. This will be a method, and a method, when you create it here, is done with open and close brackets. So we have an open bracket, and I'm going to set for a deposit, it's going to take an amount. So in our deposit method we'll have to call it something that takes an argument. So deposit amount, I'm going to equal it to a method where balance equals balance plus amount, and accept that. What does it tell us? No precedent for binary operator, please use preferences. Okay, we actually need to set the balance with self syntax, not other language syntax, and that's not done with equals, it's done with a colon. So balance is set to balance plus amount. There we go. We can see our method here with a little box that lets us click and see the source code if we want to change the source or look at it. So I'll add a new slot for withdrawal. Withdraw, and again amount equals, and we'll set balance to balance minus amount. Accept that. Now let's try some examples. If we click the evaluator on this object, everything we type in the entry box is relative to the object itself. So we can, for example, ask for the balance to get it and see what it is, 0. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to deposit 100. We'll just do it, and we see that the balance is now 100. Now I'm going to do a withdrawal of 50, do it, and again it drops to 50. So how do we reuse this object in other places? Well, one way to do it is to create a global version of it that can be referenced from other places, called maybe bank account, and then clone it for copying. Currently we can't clone it at all. This is what happens if we try clone, tells us that clone not found. Ditto with anything like copy and things like that. To get those sorts of things working, we actually have to create a parent slot that's a prototype slot and is used in method lookup. So if we create a parent, the way we say it's a prototype slot is with a star, and we're going to say what we want to set it to, and we're going to set it to one that's a global object called traits clonable, and this creates an object that can be cloned. So now if I go on my evaluator here and type clone and get it, I get an exact copy of the object, and that has its own balance. So for example, if I deposit 50 here, it doesn't affect the other object at all. And that's the basics of creating a clonable object in Self. Now you'll notice when we did clone that it has its own methods. If I were to change the source of a method in this copy, maybe do amount times 2, we'll see that it only changes it in that copy. The original one hasn't changed at all. This isn't what you normally want. Normally you want your objects, when you change the methods, to reflect changes on all copies of the object. And the way to do that is to create a trait specific for the bank account object. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go create a new object. This is going to be our trait object for our bank account, and I'm going to create this one here. Will have the parent slot set to traits clonable, and it's going to have the deposit and withdrawal methods in that one. Now I should be able to move them. Let's have a look. If I middle click here, can I move? Yes, I can. I go move, and I can move it into the slots object. And I can do the same with the withdrawal amount. So I'll click here, move, and move it into that one. Now what we want to do now is we want the parent of our bank account object, the one with the balance, to point to our new prototype. So a way to do that, there are plenty of ways to do that, but the one we're going to use here is we'll have a look at the existing traits clonable object, and you'll see this little indicator at the bottom. I'm going to click, drag it away, and connect it to our new one. And now that is the parent object for our bank account. You'll see it has methods. The methods reflect the balance object, but no balance amount, but no balance field actually exists in this trait. The balance field exists in the object that uses it as a parent. So now if I clone my object and I set, it'll work just like before. I can set the amount with a deposit. We can see that the balance changes, but there are no methods here. The methods are in the parent. If we edit the method in the parent to do amount times 2, like we had before, this will be reflected in all copies. Now if I do a deposit here, you'll see it's incremented it by the amount times 2, and the same thing will be happen in this one, in the original object, because it's sharing the method in the parent. Normally you want to give your parents a name and have them live in a standard location where it can be found, and often that's somewhere off the lobby. So if we have a look at the lobby, pull that up, we have a section here called traits. Let's have a look at the traits. This gives us a list of all the traits in the system, split up into categories: applications, core, graphical interface, platform, system. Let's put it under applications, and we'll create a slot here for this object. So I'm going to click on the middle click on the applications, or add a slot. Let's call it bank account, and I'll set it to null first. Right, I'm going to click on that, and I'll set it to our new traits object there, bank account. Now what that means is when we create a new object, we can just reference it as traits bank account if I want to create the parent here. So I'll go create the slots object, give it a new parent, parent star equals traits, and we call it bank account. Now we just need to add the balance slot, and we can use it. Just like that. Now you'll notice when you look here in the traits, list of traits, where I have bank account, it says a slots object, whereas all the other ones say traits crypto machine, traits old parser, traits RSA, etc. This has to do with the way that objects are serialized. You can give it a name, so when it's serialized to source code format on disk, it can have a nice readable name. The way to do that is to middle click on our object, and we can show annotation. And in our annotation here we have a creator slot. What we do is we set that to the name traits bank account, and now it's known as traits bank account in the list there. Well, we have our trait bank account object, but what we really want is we want a bank account object that we can clone that has the balance method as well, so that we don't have to keep creating an empty object with a balance. Again, this is done from the lobby. We'll do it from globals. Globals here. We might as well put that in applications as well. So go applications, add slot. We'll call it bank account, and again I'll default it to nil. Get the existing nil pointer and point it to our actual object there. Okay, so now at any time we can go in our shell and go bank account clone and get a nice fresh new bank account object. Now you notice again that this says uslots object as the name. We don't want it to say uslots object, we want it to say bank account. So same way as we did before, we middle click on the object, show annotation, set the creator slot to globals and bank account. And there it is, bank account. So now we can just do bank account clone and we get our bank account as the name. Notice the balance is 150, that's because the prototype, the bank account object we created, we've been using it, has a balance of 150. So I'll set that to 0. There we go. And now when we clone it, we'll get our nice fresh empty object. We can have as many of them as we want. And that's the basics of creating a bank account object.